Welcome to Her Story, where motherhood is real, raw, and unfiltered.
A powerful collaboration between Birth by Us and the Birth Squad. This is a space where mothers come together to share their truths.
From pregnancy to postpartum, through triumphs and challenges, these are the stories that connect us all.
Because every mother has a story, and we're here to listen. This is Her Story.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our special series, Her Story, collaboration with Birth by Us and the Birth Squad. So today we have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Vanessa Robinson, and she's going to share her story with us. Vanessa, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and about your path towards motherhood?
So I am currently an assistant professor here at Tufts School of Medicine within the Department of Public Health and Community Medicine. And I got my start working in maternal health, specifically in Black maternal health. And Mercy and I, we were on a project that just happened to have our paths collide. And really what brought me to the work was my personal passion as well as my professional passion. When I was coming along, getting my education in public health, there was no such thing as a formal acknowledgement of Black maternal health. It was health disparities work, but nothing in Black maternal health. And you know how people always ask, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? My thing was I always wanted to be a wife and I always wanted to be a mother, but it didn't happen so quickly. So it actually took me going through the work of Black maternal health that really allowed me to be on the path of understanding what I needed to know through my research to help me on that journey of becoming pregnant and going through my pregnancy, knowing how to navigate and advocate for myself in pregnancy, even now in postpartum. So we had our child June 8th, 2024, and he was born healthy, alert, but I didn't know that it was always going to be so. I actually was late in understanding when I was pregnant. So I found out late, about 10 weeks or so, that I was actually pregnant. And the reason why I was so late is because I was on and off with my birth control. I needed to take birth control, not because I was trying not to get pregnant, but because I had bad menstrual cramps. And so after we got married, about 2 or 3 months went by and I was like, okay, I'm kind of used to. And so I remember I woke up one day and my stomach was hurting. And so I touched my stomach and I was like, you know what, today I think I may need to go and take a test. And then I found out I was pregnant. So I immediately made an appointment that Monday. And that's when they told me that I was like 10 and a half weeks. And I was excited. I was getting myself prepared, just doing all of the things, in terms of professionally looking at the research. How do I best prepare? Because it's one thing to understand research in theory. It's another thing to actually go through the process of becoming a mother. But then also I did a lot of personal preparation, prayer, what I would call faith walks. So going to the park and just really trying to get myself geared up. I would say the first trimester it was okay. I had a series of headaches, but it really wasn't until the third trimester where I started to, kind of get into a bit of a panic. I remember just going to my regular appointment one day over at Brigham and Women's. Shout out to Dr. Katie Doof. She was my provider or OB-GYN throughout the entire process. But she told me they had ran a series of tests. They do what's called a non-stress test and also an ultrasound just to, check for the baby's heart rate, breathing and everything. And so she said that he classified as an SGA. So that's small for his gestational age. And so, of course, being the researcher that I was, I'm taking all of this information in as I'm at the hospital. But once I remember I wanted to understand so much more about it that I went to the nearest library. I couldn't even wait to get home because I just needed to understand what this was. So I started to do all of my research and then I just started to think to myself, oh my goodness, all of the worst case scenario, possibilities, that comes with SGA. And so I just remember really feeling a bit down and just kind of like, what does this mean? Because I had never heard of SGA. And I had even talked to my mom and friends of mine that were pregnant, and because everyone has their own unique journey, none of them had this experience to where their baby was classified as an SGA baby. There were points in time in my pregnancy where I felt isolated, not because I didn't have support. I felt isolated because even with the support that I had, they didn't understand what I was going through because my situation was not their situation. And so every week, from that point in time, starting with my third trimester to the end of pregnancy, I would go into the doctor's office twice a week. And that was a bit rough. So Mondays, I would do an NST, a non-stress test. And then on Thursdays is when I would do an ultrasound. And what really kept me going is every time we took a test, he passed his test. And so I was like, okay, so maybe he's just small for his age. Maybe I don't need to necessarily worry. But it's just that process of, becoming a mother and the what ifs and, what can I do? Basically, that's what I kept asking myself. And so my doctor just pretty much told me to, eat a healthy diet. And that's how I really started to understand, not just in theory, but in practice as I'm working through this process, how nutrition was important. But every week when she would check for his weight, he would increase, but he wasn't meeting the bell curve, but he was increasing on an every week basis. And I can't speak for other mothers, but for me, what kept me going was that he was improving each and every week. And it was that I had to look forward to. I had to go ahead and switch my mind from, what are they going to say this week? Am I going to get something negative this week? He progressed, all of these weeks prior. So he's going to be fine. I remember because he was small for his gestational age, when it came around the time that he was due, we really didn't know when he was going to be due. Sometimes they would say, okay, well, maybe he'll need to be born at week 37, maybe week 38, maybe week 39. We just kind of had to see. But in the end, he was born at like 38 weeks and 4 days. So actually today makes his 3-month birthday, I guess, if you will. And when he was born, they thought he was actually smaller than what he was. So he actually was okay. But I remember I got him out in 4 pushes. And in my mind, it's just so crazy how your mind just goes into mother mode, because when he came out, the first thing I said was, get the umbilical cord off of his neck, get it off of his neck now. And they were like, it's okay, like it's on his neck, but he's not choking, it's not around his neck. I was like, okay, because all I could see was the back of his neck, and I just saw the umbilical cord around his neck, but I didn't want any sort of complication. But yeah, the delivery part was really quick. I was in labor and delivery for about 26 hours with him. But the delivery part, it seemed like it was like 15 minutes because I got him out in 4 pushes. So that was easy. Then it's time to go home. My mom and my mother-in-law, they were very good with support. I would definitely encourage any mother out there, a person who's thinking about motherhood, a person who is about to deliver, make sure you have support, and allow people to help you. Because, for instance, I know if a person is anything like myself, I'm a creature of habit and I like to be in control, especially when it comes to, my child. So it was very hard, even for my own mother and my mother-in-law, to help me. But, it's a blessing to have people that genuinely support you, not just with the baby, but just with yourself. And after they left, that's when the real journey began. Because it's my husband and myself, but my husband, he works throughout the day. So I really had to get used to, seeing a person whom I created that I'm completely 110% responsible for. I love my son. I love my son dearly. But there have been times where I've actually grieved the old Vanessa, because I'm like, wow, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I had 9 months to say bye to the old, single Vanessa where it's just her to now, Vanessa, she's the wife, she's the mom. And see, everything for me happened at the same time. I got married and then my child came 10 months later. So I'm getting used to motherhood and being a wife. So that has been both a blessing, but also a challenge in as much as I'm really looking at myself there in the mirror and acknowledging and realizing some things about myself that I did not know before because I've never had to tap into that part of me. So it has been a beautiful process. I have to give a lot of acknowledgement to my husband in terms of his support because we've had a lot of sleepless nights, but they've all been worth it. But I would say the biggest thing for me, if you were to ask me like 3 important words for my journey, I think they would be support, pace. And when I say pace, pace yourself in terms of how you grow, pace yourself with your child. Your child is learning you, you're learning your child, you're learning your partner and how he fathers your child, and love, because that's what keeps me going. The love that I have for my husband, the love that I have for my child, and just really seeing our family grow. And it has been a very beautiful and challenging process.
Wow. I love it. I always love to hear your story because I feel like when I think about Black birthing joy, I think about you truly. And so
Aw.
I'm really happy that you were able to share like all the details of that experience on this episode. You mentioned a couple things already around like mental health. You talked about mindset, you talked about support and love. And as we know, postpartum and prenatal anxiety, depression, all those things are very real, right? So tell me more about the postpartum period. Did your mental health shift? Did you feel any anxiety? Did you feel that depression even or overwhelm? And how did you cope? And maybe what advice would you give to moms who are struggling in that same way?
In answer to your question, was there a mental shift? Absolutely. In numerous ways. There was a shift where 100% of my focus went to my husband, where now that attention has had to be shared with his son. Also, I had different expectations of my husband and how I wanted him to support me throughout the process versus how he showed up. And that was something that I had to get used to. And not to say that I disregarded what I needed. The mental shift within myself in terms of I had to learn quickly to get rid of the expectation that I placed on myself of being this perfect mother. And that goes back to that word that I was talking about earlier, pace, self. Some other ways, there would be some days where I'm like, okay, I can do this. I get up and I'm looking at him and he's smiling and he's behaving. And I'm like, okay, I got this. Like, I got it in the bag. And then there are other days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I need a nanny. I need a cook. I need a support group. I need all the things, right? And so I've learned through those mental shifts, it's not necessarily how you feel, but I've learned to acknowledge how I feel, but to understand to go through the motions. So it's kind of like a roller coaster in a positive sense, right? So some days you go up, some days you go down. So for me, what I've come to realize is to pace myself by just going with the motions. And I just learned how to pace myself. But I can't pour from an empty cup. So once I get them calm, then I come back to myself and I just, make sure that I give myself time to just, check in with myself.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I would love for you to share a little bit more about your breastfeeding journey. And what was your initial experience with breastfeeding? Did you have any challenges? What was the support like? And could you share any advice you have for new moms who are starting their breastfeeding journey?
Breastfeeding for me has been a challenge. When I first got home and I had the support of my mother and my mother-in-law, we did first start breastfeeding. But then he started to go to his pediatrician appointments, and the pediatrician had said that he wasn't gaining as much weight as he needed to. And I was a bit concerned about that. And with all of the other issues that surround breastfeeding, for me, it wasn't that I could not breastfeed. I made the decision to go ahead and do formula because of the other responsibilities that I had to do. No one had prepared me for the amount of energy it takes from you physically and mentally to breastfeed. So, for instance, in my household, I'm the cook, the nurturer, the wife, I'm the mom, I'm the diaper changer, I'm the feeder, right? So for me, in order to keep our life balanced, but also ensure that he's gaining his weight properly and he's getting fed on a timely schedule, he decided to go ahead and switch to formula. Every now and again, when he's really, because he'll make that notion like, I don't want formula, I want you. And so then I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll like whip it out, right? But the most part, he's getting fed formula, but I'm making sure to look at his development and he's developing fine. So the best advice I can give to mothers is this. You will have an idea of how your pregnancy journey will be, but then just have an expectation to expect the unexpected. And if something comes up that's unexpected, as long as you're healthy, as long as your baby is healthy, you're okay. So it may mean that you were really one of those people like me that you really said, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do formula. I'm going to breastfeed all the way. And then life happens and then you have to adjust. The biggest thing is adjustment, and don't be so don't be so stubborn to stay on a path that you think that you're supposed to be on at the cost of your health and the cost of your baby's health. So that's the advice I would have.
That's great advice. Other questions I wanted to ask you about the postpartum time. Like, as we know, pregnancy comes with a lot of bodily changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that might be something that some women struggle with postpartum. In your experience, did you have those challenges at all? And how does one kind of like balance the recovery while also balancing like taking care of themselves physically and this new newborn?
That's such an important question. Say, allow yourself time to heal. Going back to that word pace. And for me, or for my son and I, the way I help us both is that I walk. So it's a way for me to exercise, but then it's also a way for him to get some sun. So he just isn't in the house all day, looking in my face, but he gets to see the trees. He gets to feel the wind, Honestly, every time we come back from walking, I've noticed on the days that we do walk, he's a lot calmer. So, it's not just you anymore. You have to think about, you and your baby. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think in those type of situations, it encourages you to think outside the box in terms of how can I make fun for the both of us, right? To where it doesn't feel like work, but he's learning me, I'm learning him. So for me, it has been walks. It's a way for me to clear my mind, in addition to, getting my body back right. But I don't have a particular deadline. I think that sometimes for certain people, deadlines, if you don't meet that deadline in terms of being a particular weight or looking a particular way by a certain time frame, that could probably lead to some sadness or maybe even depression. So, take your time with yourself. Walking is always good, and really for me it's symbolic because with walking you have to put one foot in front of the other, and that's how life is. You have to put one foot in front of the other. As long as you don't stop, you're okay.
I like that. And I mean, we keep talking about pace. So this next question kind of hits on that pretty squarely. I know
Mhm.
your son is still in the first year. We're hitting that 3-month milestone, which is super exciting. How do you feel about like watching him grow? And how do you balance like the excitement of all that, but also the anxieties of, is he growing on time? Is he meeting his milestones? How do you balance both of those as a new mom?
Yeah, well, I make sure I go to our pediatrician appointments, or in between those appointments, if I have questions, I make sure to ask those questions. I was very strategic about as who was going to deliver my child and help me through this process, but I was also very strategic about the pediatrician that I selected. I wanted a pediatrician that I felt that I had a personal connection with, so that when I had certain questions, I would not second guess asking those questions. So, and let's say, for instance, you go to your pediatrician or your child's pediatrician, and there's not a connect. You can always change. I think the difference between this generation coming up versus the generation, let's say, baby boomers, such as my parents, it was always, just take information for what it is. Whereas I feel like we're having a shift to where now it's more of a bi-directional expectation in terms of a patient-doctor relationship, but also a doctor-patient relationship. And I honestly think those are the best type of relationships to have, where there's open communication with both. Because the more a person is comfortable with you and you with them, the more information that's being exchanged, which can ultimately help you and your child and them as a provider. Because if there are certain things that they need to diagnose that you're not telling them, then they're not able to do their job to their fullest capacity.
So I know you mentioned a little bit about the ways you spend time with your son and bond with your son, and I'm wondering, how did you navigate the moments when bonding didn't come as naturally or when you felt overwhelmed?
Sing to him. Singing works. I think it's going to be different based on each child, though. Because, for instance, with mine, he responded to singing, but for some other person, he or she may respond well to being held. My son actually doesn't like being held when he's crying. He's like, trying to trick me. Like, give me the bottle. I don't care about all this holding. Give me the bottle, and then I'll let you hold me. So I had to learn my child. So reading. He likes when I read to him, especially when I'm reading the book and then I go back to looking at him, because he actually feels like, okay, she's paying attention to me. I don't know what she's saying, but she's paying attention to me. And he smiles. I learn things like smiling, kicking, shoulder movement. I look for those type of things and I examine him. Husband uses the word examine. He says I examine him every day, but I'm his mother. I'm looking just to make sure if everything is in order. What do I have questions about? Actually, I was reading to him one day. This was about maybe a month. Well, no, maybe about 3 weeks ago. And I just, every now and again when he gets upset or when I need to calm him, I say, hi. And he actually said hi back. I was very surprised this early. I would just say, for a parent that is an overthinker like myself, pay attention, but also enjoy your child. He's not a project. Your child is a person. Your baby's a person.
Those are such sweet moments, tender moments that you shared with us. So I really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. We've kind of come to the end of our interview, but I wanted to ask, is there any other things that you want to share with our listeners?
For those that are interested in becoming mothers, for those that are mothers, you got this. You always have had this. Whatever comes your way, you'll be ready or you'll get ready. That's it.
Sound advice. That's great. Well, Dr. Vanessa Robinson, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for you coming here and sharing your experiences.
It was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to her story. We hope that these stories inspire, uplift, and remind you that you're never alone on this path.
Tune in on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and join the conversation.
We would love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and you can connect with us on social media.
Together, we're building a community, one voice at a time.